You there, with the mop? Come here. I want your opinion on billion-dollar investments. The laughter that followed those words cut through the boardroom like broken glass. Eleanor Ashford stood at the head of the conference table on the 52nd floor of Ashford Dynamics, 48 years old, gray eyes that had destroyed careers with a single glance. She had called the janitor over like someone calling a dog to perform a trick. Derek Holloway, 42, stopped mopping the corner of the room. His uniform was faded gray. His hands were rough from years of cleaning floors, scrubbing toilets, and being invisible. He had worked at Ashford Dynamics for 4 years. Before that, 2 years of similar jobs in other cities, always watching, always silent, until now. The executives around the table smiled at Eleanor's joke. Preston Whitmore, the CFO, checked his phone. Celeste Montgomery, the COO, smirked with satisfaction. They were discussing a $500 million acquisition of Meridian Tech, a European energy company. Derek walked calmly toward Eleanor. The board members exchanged amused glances. "With all due respect, ma'am," Derek said, "you're going to want to sit down for this." Eleanor's smile turned cold. "Please, enlighten us." Something broke inside Derek at that moment. 4 years of being treated like furniture. 4 years of swallowing his pride to protect his daughter. He was planning to quit next month anyway. Move to another city like he had done so many times before. If he was leaving, he would leave with one act of truth. "Your acquisition of Meridian Tech," Derek said. His voice was steady. "In 72 hours, you're going to lose $280 million. Their CFO is hiding a tax debt in Luxembourg. It will explode when the European audit is published on Thursday." The room went silent. Preston Whitmore's fingers froze over his keyboard. Then he started typing fast. His face went pale. "My God," Preston whispered. "There's an investigation. It's in German. Our systems didn't catch it." Eleanor Ashford stared at Derek Holloway, the janitor who pushed a mop, the man she had called over to humiliate for entertainment. He had just saved her company nearly $300 million. The silence in that room was the loudest thing Derek had ever heard. Eleanor's voice came out low, controlled. "Dangerous. Nobody leaves this building until I have answers." Her eyes locked onto Derek. "Especially you." "I need to pick up my daughter from school at 3 p.m., Derek replied. "If we can finish this before then, I'd appreciate it." Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know what to call it yet. But in that moment, looking at the janitor who knew more than her entire team of analysts, one question burned in her mind. Who was this man? And what else was he hiding? The next 3 hours were chaos. Celeste Montgomery demanded answers. Raymond Burke, the legal counsel, wanted to call the authorities. Preston Whitmore confirmed every detail Derek had mentioned. The Luxembourg tax debt was real. The European audit was coming. Meridian Tech was a trap. Eleanor watched Derek through it all. He stood near the window, calm, like a man who had seen much worse than angry executives. That calmness bothered her more than anything else. "Verify everything," Eleanor ordered, "and pull out of the acquisition quietly. Blame it on strategic reassessment." By 2:45 p.m., the withdrawal was complete. No public announcement, no scandal. The board dispersed with pale faces and nervous handshakes. Derek checked his watch. "May I go now? My daughter." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, my office, 7 a.m. "Yes, ma'am." She watched him leave, a janitor in a faded gray uniform, walking past executives who had been laughing at him 3 hours ago. None of them laughed now. That night, Eleanor could not sleep. She had built her empire through instinct and powerful connections. Senator Williams answered her calls personally. The Deputy Attorney General had been her classmate at Harvard. She had not reached the top by being kind or by missing details. Yet a janitor had seen what her entire team had missed. She poured herself a drink at 2 a.m. and stood by her penthouse window. The city lights spread below her like scattered diamonds. Who was Derek Holloway? Where did a man who pushed a mop learn about European tax audits and Luxembourg financial structures? The humiliation burned worse than the relief of saving $280 million. Eleanor Ashford had been outsmarted by the help, and she needed to know why. At 7 a.m., Eleanor locked her office door with Derek inside. "Who are you, really?" "Derek Holloway, janitor, single father. Nobody who pushes a mop understands tax audits in Luxembourg. I read, and people talk like I don't exist." Eleanor studied him. He sat across from her desk with no fear in his eyes, no nervousness, just patience. She changed tactics. "Your daughter, how old?" Something crossed Derek's face, a crack in his armor. "Lily, 8 years old." His voice softened. "She's everything." Eleanor leaned forward. "Then you understand that I can't have someone with your knowledge walking around my building without knowing who he is." Derek stood up slowly. "And you understand that some people have good reasons for not wanting to be found." He walked toward the door and stopped. Without turning around, he spoke again. "I was going to quit at the end of the month, move to another city. But yesterday you treated me like I was less than human in front of an entire room." He paused. "And I thought about the other people in this building, Marisol in the cafeteria, Gerald in security. They take that treatment every day without being able to fight back." Now he turned to face her. "I could fight back, so I did." Eleanor Ashford sat in silence. Something cold moved through her chest. She had humiliated him for entertainment, called him over like a pet to perform, and instead of anger, instead of revenge, he had saved her company. "You may go," she said quietly. Derek opened the door. "Mr. Holloway," he stopped. "Thank you for what you did yesterday." Derek nodded once and left. Eleanor remained at her desk for a long time. She was trying to remember the last time she had felt shame. She couldn't. Celeste Montgomery did not accept mysteries. 2 weeks after the boardroom incident, she walked into Eleanor's office with a folder. "I ran a full background check on your janitor." Eleanor looked up from her computer. "I didn't ask you to do that." "You should have." Celeste dropped the folder on the desk. Derek Holloway appeared out of nowhere 6 years ago. Before that, nothing. No employment records, no credit history, no social media. It's like he didn't exist. Eleanor opened the folder. Birth certificate for Lily Holloway, legitimate. Mother, Hannah Holloway, deceased 6 years ago. Hit by a car in a parking lot in Ohio. Police report said accident, but the father's history was empty. He's either in witness protection, or he's a criminal, or he's a spy, Celeste said. Any of those options is our problem. Eleanor turned the pages slowly. Or he's someone who went through something terrible and needed to disappear. Celeste scoffed. You're getting sentimental. I'm being analytical. Eleanor closed the folder. A spy would have stayed quiet and let us lose millions. A criminal wouldn't risk exposure to save someone else's company. Then, what is he? Eleanor didn't answer, but something in Derek's story pulled at her. The young daughter, the dead wife, the years of invisibility. Keep investigating, she told Celeste, but quietly, and report only to me. Celeste raised an eyebrow. You're protecting him. I'm gathering information. Same thing. After Celeste left, Eleanor sat alone with the folder. She opened it again and looked at the police report. Hannah Holloway. Died in a parking lot. Ruled an accident. But accidents didn't make men disappear for 6 years. Accidents didn't teach janitors about European tax audits. Something much darker had happened to Derek Holloway, and Eleanor was going to find out what. 2 weeks passed. Eleanor arrived at her office on a Tuesday morning and found an unmarked envelope on her desk. No name, no return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. Your CFO is embezzling funds through a shell company in Delaware. $2, $3 million over 18 months. Look for payments to Whitmore Consulting LLC. Eleanor's blood turned cold. Preston Whitmore had worked with her for 9 years. He had been in that boardroom when Derek saved them from the Meridian disaster. He had typed frantically to confirm the Luxembourg debt. And now this. She ordered a secret audit, told no one except her most trusted accountant. 3 days later, the results came back. Every word in that note was true. Preston was confronted in Eleanor's office on a Friday evening. He broke down crying, confessed everything, begged for mercy. Eleanor fired him quietly. No police, no scandal, just a resignation letter and a sealed severance agreement. That afternoon, she took the elevator down to the maintenance floor. She found Derek organizing cleaning supplies in a storage room. "It was you." Derek didn't look up. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." "Preston Whitmore." Now he looked at her. Mr. Whitmore made personal phone calls in the executive bathroom at 6 a.m. He thought he was alone. "Why do you care?" Derek put down a bottle of floor cleaner. "Because when executives steal, the people at the bottom pay the price. Budget cuts, layoffs, reduced benefits." He turned to face her fully. "Marisol Fuentes in the cafeteria has 3 kids and diabetes. If her budget gets cut, she loses her health insurance. I care about her." Eleanor stood in that storage room surrounded by mops and cleaning chemicals. She was worth billions. She had dined with senators and closed deals that shaped industries, and a janitor was teaching her about the people who kept her empire running. "How long have you been watching?" she asked quietly. "Long enough." "And you've seen other things?" Derek's silence was answer enough. Eleanor left without another word, but something had shifted inside her, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. She had stopped seeing the invisible people years ago. Derek had never stopped. Eleanor called Derek to her office 3 days later. She locked the door and closed the blinds. "I've protected you from Celeste, convinced the board you're harmless, but I need the truth now, or I can't keep protecting you." Derek sat across from her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of years. "My real name doesn't matter anymore. Before I was Derek Holloway, I was a portfolio analyst. I managed investments for extremely wealthy clients. I was very good at it." He paused. "One of my biggest clients was Victor Sørensen, Danish billionaire, famous philanthropist. I discovered that the portfolio I managed was laundering money from drug trafficking and weapons deals." "You reported him." "I testified before a federal grand jury. 18 people were arrested, including Victor." Derek's voice cracked. "My wife, Hannah. 3 months later, she was hit by a car in a parking lot. Police said it was an accident." He looked at Eleanor with hollow eyes. "It wasn't an accident. I know it wasn't." Eleanor felt the weight of that grief pressing against her chest. "Lily was 2 years old. She doesn't remember her mother." Derek's hands tightened on the armrests. "I disappeared to protect her. Worked temporary jobs across the country for 2 years before settling here. Victor Sørensen has a son named Marcus. He swore revenge. If he finds me, Lily becomes an orphan." The room was silent. Eleanor finally understood. Derek wasn't a threat. He wasn't a spy or a criminal. He was a man who had lost everything for doing the right thing. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because you asked, and because you've been kinder to the people downstairs since we talked." He almost smiled. "I think you might actually be someone worth trusting." Eleanor didn't know what to say, so she said the only thing that felt true. "I'm sorry for what happened to your wife, for what you've had to become." Derek nodded once. It was enough. The next morning, Eleanor made a decision. She met Derek in an empty conference room before anyone else arrived at the building. "I have a proposal," she said. "You continue exactly as you are, janitor, invisible. But when you see something I need to know, you tell me. In return, I improve conditions for every worker at the bottom of this company. And if your safety is ever threatened, I use every resource I have to protect you and Lily." Derek listened carefully. "I have conditions." "Name them." "First, nobody ever knows about this. If you need to fire me publicly, do it. Accepted. Second, any information I give you, you verify yourself. Never mention me. Understood. Third, if any decision you make hurts the people at the bottom, I stop helping." Eleanor extended her hand. "Deal." They shook on it. "We need a system," Derek said. "No digital trails, nothing that can be traced." Eleanor nodded. "There's a maintenance closet on the 50th floor. Locker 7. I'll check it every morning at 7:15. Notes only, handwritten, destroyed after reading. Agreed. Derek stood to leave, then stopped at the door. What about Celeste? She's still investigating me. I'll handle Celeste. From now on, any investigation into you goes through me and me alone. Derek studied her face for a moment. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. You're different than I thought you'd be, he said. I'm different than I thought I'd be too. He left without another word. Eleanor stood alone in the empty conference room. She had just made an alliance with a janitor, a secret pact that could destroy her reputation if it ever came to light. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was doing something that mattered, something beyond profit margins and power plays. She just hoped she could keep Derek and his daughter safe. Because if Marcus Sorensen ever found them, there would be no second chances. 6 months passed. The notes appeared regularly in Locker 7. Always handwritten. Always destroyed after reading. A merger with a company hiding bankruptcy. Derek warned her. Eleanor pulled out. A marketing director selling client data to competitors. Derek heard him bragging in the bathroom. The man was gone within a week. A shift in European energy regulations that would affect stock prices. Derek overheard analysts discussing it before the official announcement. Eleanor repositioned her investments and made $40 million. But the real changes were quieter. Eleanor implemented a new wellness program for employees. Salaries for maintenance staff increased by 15%. Benefits expanded. The cafeteria improved its food quality. Marisol Fuentes cried in the break room when she learned her health plan now covered her insulin completely. Gerald Patterson, the 62-year-old security guard, could finally start planning for retirement. Tommy Reeves, a young man from the maintenance crew, organized an informal emergency fund for his co-workers. Celeste Montgomery fought every change. This sentimental phase is going to cost millions, she complained during a board meeting. It's costing less than our previous turnover rate, Eleanor replied coldly, and it's generating results. Question me again and we'll review your position on this board. Celeste went silent. She knew when she had lost. The workers noticed the changes. They didn't know why Eleanor Ashford had suddenly started caring about people like them. But they felt it. The atmosphere in the building shifted. People smiled more, worked harder, stayed longer. Verbs published a small article about the humanist turn at Ashford Dynamics. It was just a sidebar, a few paragraphs buried in a larger piece about corporate culture, but it was the beginning of something bigger. Eleanor read the article in her office and thought about Derek. He had asked for nothing in return, no money, no promotion, just better treatment for the invisible people. She had spent 20 years climbing to the top. It took a janitor to show her what she could see from up there. 8 months after their agreement began, Derek left a different kind of note. Someone is following me. Man in his early 30s. He's appeared 3 times near Lily's school this week. I'm not certain it's connected, but I'm worried. Eleanor's stomach dropped. She called Donald Mercer, her head of security, former FBI, the kind of man who could find anyone and anything. I need you to investigate someone, she told him, quietly, no records, no trail. Donald took the description Derek had provided. Tall, brown hair, early 30s, drives a black sedan. 2 weeks later, Donald had answers. His name is Warren Cross, private investigator. Works for international clients with deep pockets. Who hired him? That took some digging. Donald placed a folder on Eleanor's desk. The payment was routed through a holding company in Copenhagen, subsidiary of a conglomerate controlled by the Sorensen family. Eleanor felt cold spread through her body. Marcus Sorensen was hunting. He didn't know where Derek was yet. But he was looking, and he had hired a professional to find the man who had destroyed his father's empire. That night, Eleanor couldn't eat. She kept thinking about Lily, 8 years old, brown hair like her father, loved books and drawing, and had no idea that a dangerous man was searching for her dad. Lily had already lost her mother. Eleanor would not let her lose her father, too. She picked up her phone and called Donald Mercer again. I need you to find me someone, she said. Former intelligence, someone who knows how to create distractions, someone who isn't afraid of dangerous people. I know a guy, Donald replied. Garrett Sullivan, ex-CIA, specializes in counterintelligence. Set up a meeting tomorrow. Eleanor hung up and stared out her window at the city lights. The game had changed. Now she wasn't just protecting a secret. She was preparing for war. Eleanor met Derek in the parking garage at 5 a.m. Marcus Sorensen knows you're alive, she said. He doesn't know where yet, but he's getting closer. Derek's face went pale. I should disappear again. Take Lily and run. And live as a fugitive forever? Have Lily grow up without stability, without friends, always looking over her shoulder? Eleanor shook her head. There's another option. We create a false trail. She explained the plan. Garrett Sullivan was perfect for the job. Right age, background in finance, experience with organized crime cases. They would build him a complete fake identity as the real informant in the Sorensen case. We'll call him Graham Morrison, Eleanor said. We'll create documentation going back years, employment records, relocation history, old correspondence. When Marcus investigates, he'll find Sullivan instead of you. Derek stared at her. You're asking a man to become a target. I'm hiring a professional to do the job he was trained for. And if something goes wrong, Sullivan knows the risks. He's done this kind of work before. Derek was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. You definitely don't owe me anything. Eleanor looked at him. You lost your wife because you did the right thing. You gave up your career, your identity, your entire life to protect your daughter. And instead of becoming bitter, you spent your days looking out for cafeteria workers and security guards. She paused. I've spent 20 years surrounded by people who would sell their own mothers for a stock tip. You're the most decent person I've ever met. So, yes, I'm going to protect you. Because people like you shouldn't have to keep running. Derek's eyes glistened. He looked away. Thank you, he whispered. Thank me when this is over. The next 3 weeks were intense. Sullivan worked with specialists to build the Graham Morrison identity. Every detail was checked and rechecked. Eleanor called in favors she had been saving for years. Friends at the Department of Justice added sealed records that confirmed the existence of a protected informant, without revealing details. The trap was almost ready. Now they just had to wait for Marcus to take the bait. Garrett Sullivan started at Ashford Dynamics as an international risk consultant. He was deliberately visible, took meetings in glass-walled conference rooms, made phone calls in the lobby, left digital breadcrumbs that any decent investigator would find. Warren Cross took the bait within 2 weeks. Donald Mercer confirmed it. Cross had shifted his surveillance entirely to Sullivan. He followed him to restaurants, to his apartment, to his morning jogs in the park. Derek Holloway had become invisible again. But Marcus Sorensen wanted more than surveillance. 3 weeks after Sullivan started, Eleanor received a call from her assistant. There's a Marcus Sorensen requesting a meeting. He says it's about business opportunities in the European energy sector. Eleanor's heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm. Schedule it for Friday, dinner at Laurent's. The restaurant was 5 stars, private rooms, excellent security cameras that Donald Mercer would be monitoring. Marcus arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. He was 36 years old with blue eyes that never smiled. 2 men accompanied him. They were introduced as business associates, but Eleanor recognized bodyguards when she saw them. Mrs. Ashford, Marcus said as they sat down, your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Mr. Sorensen. Then you know my family has had some difficulties in recent years. I read the papers. Marcus smiled without warmth. My father built an empire. Someone destroyed it with lies and testimony. Now he's dying in prison. Cancer. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Marcus leaned forward. Your business instincts have been almost supernatural lately, Mrs. Ashford. It's as if someone has been feeding you privileged information. I have a competent team. A team that includes, perhaps, someone who cost my family dearly. Eleanor held his gaze without flinching. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned back. My father will be dead within months. Before he dies, I want to give him a gift. The name of the person who destroyed everything he built. I can't help you with that. Can't or won't. Both. Marcus stood up slowly. His bodyguards moved with him like shadows. I will find this person, Mrs. Ashford. You can make this easier, or you can stand in my way. He paused at the door. I don't recommend standing in my way. After he left, Eleanor sat alone at the table for 20 minutes. Her hands were shaking. She had faced hostile takeovers, congressional hearings, billion-dollar lawsuits. None of them had frightened her like the cold promise in Marcus Sorensen's eyes. This man would burn the world to avenge his father, and she had just put herself between him and his target. The next morning, Eleanor called Sullivan to her office. We need to accelerate the timeline. Marcus is getting impatient. Sullivan nodded. He had already heard about the dinner from Donald Mercer. The documentation is solid, he said. Employment history going back 8 years. Relocation records, bank statements, even sealed mentions in federal files thanks to your DOJ contacts. If Marcus investigates Graham Morrison, everything will check out. And if he doesn't believe it, then we adapt. Sullivan's voice was steady. I've spent 20 years in situations where people wanted me dead. The spoiled son of a criminal doesn't scare me. Eleanor studied him. Why are you doing this? The money is good, but not good enough to risk your life. Sullivan was quiet for a moment. I've worked a lot of cases over the years, protected a lot of people. Most of them were wealthy, politicians, CEOs, people who could afford private security. He paused. I've never seen someone like you risk everything to protect a janitor. He's not just a janitor. I know, I read his file. Derek Holloway gave up everything to do the right thing. Lost his wife, lost his career, lost his identity. And instead of becoming bitter, he spent years looking out for cafeteria workers and security guards. Sullivan shook his head slowly. Men like that deserve peace. They deserve to watch their daughters grow up without fear. Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. So yes, Sullivan continued, I'll be the target. I'll take whatever Marcus throws at me. Because Derek Holloway already sacrificed enough. Eleanor didn't trust herself to speak. She was risking her reputation, her political connections, possibly her freedom if the document fraud was ever discovered. All for a man who had humiliated her in a boardroom almost a year ago. No, all for a man who had shown her what she had forgotten. That power meant nothing if you didn't use it to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Thank you, she finally said. Sullivan stood up. Thank me when this is over, and when it is over, you should know something. What? You're a better person than you think you are, Mrs. Ashford. Most people in your position would have handed Derek over the moment Marcus came knocking. He left without waiting for a response. Eleanor sat alone in her office for a long time. She thought about Derek and Lily, about Marisol and Gerald and Tommy, about all the invisible people she had ignored for 20 years. She had built an empire by being ruthless. Maybe it was time to protect it by being human. Marcus Sorensen demanded a second meeting. This time he wanted Sullivan present. They met at a neutral location, a law firm downtown with no connection to either party. Eleanor brought Donald Mercer. Marcus brought his 2 bodyguards and a thick folder. Sullivan sat across from Marcus with perfect calm. Mr. Sullivan, Marcus began. Or should I call you Graham Morrison, the man who testified against my father? Sullivan didn't blink. I testified because your father was a criminal. Drug trafficking, money laundering, lives destroyed across 3 continents. You destroyed my family. Your father destroyed dozens of families. I just made sure he paid for it. Marcus opened his folder. Inside were documents, photographs, timeline reconstructions. Let's test that, shall we? For the next 2 hours, Marcus asked questions. Dates of testimony, names of prosecutors, details about the investigation, safe houses where the informant had stayed, procedures that were followed. Sullivan answered everything. His responses matched the false documentation perfectly. Real public information was mixed with carefully planted fiction. Eleanor watched Marcus's face throughout the interrogation. She saw frustration building behind those cold blue eyes. He wanted to find a crack, a mistake, something that would prove this was all a lie. He found nothing. Finally, Marcus closed his folder. "You're either who you say you are," he said slowly, "or this is the most elaborate deception I've ever encountered." Sullivan leaned forward. "I'm the man who put your father in prison, and if I had to do it again, I would." Without hesitation, Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he stood up. "My father has weeks left, perhaps days." His voice was ice. "When he's gone, I'll decide what to do with you." He looked at Eleanor. "And if I discover that I've been deceived, Mrs. Ashford, you will regret the day you decided to protect this man." He walked out with his bodyguards following. Eleanor released a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Sullivan turned to her. "That went well. He threatened to destroy us both. But he believed me, at least enough to doubt his own suspicions." Sullivan gathered his things. "Now we wait. If his father dies before he finds any proof, the obsession might die with him. And if it doesn't?" Sullivan paused at the door. "Then we'll deal with whatever comes next, together." He left. Eleanor remained in that conference room, staring at the empty chair where Marcus had sat. She had bought them time. But Marcus Sorensen was not a man who gave up easily. The real test was still coming. 3 months passed after the meeting with Marcus. Then the news came. Victor Sorensen died in a federal prison in Denmark. Cancer had taken him slowly, painfully. The obituaries called him a fallen titan of industry. They mentioned his philanthropy, his charitable foundations, his contributions to European business. They did not mention the drug trafficking, the weapons deals, the lives destroyed. Eleanor read the news in her office and felt nothing but relief. 2 weeks after the funeral, a second piece of news arrived. Marcus Sorensen had been arrested in Copenhagen. Tax evasion, money laundering, connections to criminal organizations that his father had funded for decades. Investigations that had been building for years finally reached their conclusion. Marcus would spend the next 15 years in prison. The threat was over. Eleanor waited 3 days to be certain. She had Donald Mercer verify everything through his contacts. She read every report, every news article, every legal document she could access. It was real. It was finished. On the 4th day, she met Derek in the parking garage one final time. "I'm ending our agreement," she said. Derek looked at her with surprise. "What?" "Every piece of information you give me is a risk. Marcus is gone, but there will always be curious people. Investigators, journalists, someone who might connect the dots." Eleanor took a breath. "You deserve to actually disappear, not to live in permanent limbo. And the people I've been watching, the ones who need protection? You taught me to see them." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Tommy Reeves is being promoted next month, Director of Employee Welfare. He'll report directly to me. He came from the maintenance crew. He knows everyone. He cares about everyone." Derek was silent for a long moment. "You've changed, Eleanor. You reminded me who I was before success hardened me." She extended her hand. "Thank you. For everything. For saving my company. For opening my eyes. For trusting me with your story." Derek shook her hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "Take care of them," he said. "Always." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Lily asked me yesterday what I want for my birthday next month. I told her I wanted peace." He looked back at Eleanor. "I think I might finally get it. You've earned it, more than anyone I've ever known." Derek nodded once. Then he walked away. Eleanor watched him disappear into the early morning darkness, a janitor in a faded gray uniform, a father who had sacrificed everything, a man who had changed her life without ever asking for anything in return. She stayed in that parking garage until the sun came up, Then she went back to her office and started building the company he had helped her imagine. 5 years later, the Forbes cover showed Eleanor Ashford standing in the lobby of Ashford Dynamics. The headline read, "The Compassionate Capitalist, How One CEO Revolutionized Corporate Culture." The article detailed everything: the wellness programs, the increased wages, the benefits that had become industry standards, the employee retention rates that made competitors jealous. Tommy Reeves was quoted extensively. "Eleanor Ashford taught me that a company is only as strong as its most invisible employee. We don't have invisible employees anymore." Celeste Montgomery had retired 2 years earlier, not fired. She had simply recognized that the company had evolved beyond her ability to adapt. She and Eleanor had parted with mutual respect, if not friendship. The article mentioned awards, recognition, imitation by other corporations. It talked about a movement that had started in one building and spread across an industry. It did not mention Derek Holloway. Nobody knew about Derek Holloway. In a coastal town in North Carolina, a 47-year-old man worked part-time at the local library. He shelved books, helped elderly patrons find large print novels, and ran a weekly reading program for children. His daughter Lily was 13 now. She played violin, had close friends, and dreamed of becoming a lawyer to help people nobody sees. When she asked her father what he did before becoming a librarian, he told her he helped people make better choices. "Were you a teacher?" she asked. "Something like that," he replied. On the morning of Eleanor's birthday, she found an envelope on her desk. No return address. Handwritten. She knew immediately who it was from. "Eleanor, I read the Forbes article. You did more than I ever imagined possible. Lily asked me last week what I used to do. I told her I helped people make better choices. She asked if I was a teacher. I said something like that. Thank you for giving me the chance to just be a father. Thank you for protecting my daughter. Thank you for proving that power and compassion can exist together. Keep building something that matters. D." Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Then she placed it in her desk drawer next to the first note Derek had ever left her. The warning about Meridian Tech that had started everything. She walked to her window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there, a father and daughter were living in peace. Marisol Fuentes had retired last year with a full pension. Gerald Patterson spent his days fishing and visiting grandchildren. Tommy Reeves was changing lives every single day. And she, the billionaire who had once humiliated a janitor for entertainment, finally understood the truth. Leadership was not about power. It was about having the courage to see value in the people the world considered invisible. Eleanor Ashford smiled. Then she got back to work. The end.